So in this segment, we're going to be talking about we didn't get a single pound, anger in Barnsley at broken Tory promises. So this is about the fact that Barnsley didn't get any of the level up funding. So the reality is that a child born in Barnsley has very different opportunities to one born in Guildford, said Matt Wright, artistic director of Barnsley Youth Choir, gesturing excitedly towards the building. So it's a building that was for musicians, I think. Cut bits of the article out, but it's not important. The more we read through the article, the more clear how in need Barnsley is for levelling up funds. Barnsley did vote for Brexit and did get EU structural funds previously. I could not find the exact amount they got, but for Sheffield it looks like they face cutbacks in European funding that are much more severe than their own worst fears, massively deeper than in any other area of the UK, and that EU funding has been cut by about half. Those cuts apply to for a few different reasons, so it's hard to know how much Barnsley have lost. I was going to say regions. Those cuts apply to a few different regions, so it's hard to know how much Barnsley have lost, but it looks like it could be in the millions. But because structural funds are given region by region, it's hard to know exactly how much Barnsley have lost. But optimism in the town is muted around the budget, while levelling up the defining mission of Johnson's government will surely concede for the likes of Barnsley. The town has yet to receive a penny. Earlier funding rounds have seen seemingly winning bids rejected. That's in their opinion, of course. To make matters worse, the government chose to exclude the former mining town from the top tier of places most in need for help. It has not gone unnoticed that Richmond, the relatively prosperous rural Yorkshire constituency of the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, secured highest priority status. So we can see that the UK system of the levelling up funds is not based on need. Barnsley is an area that needs the money instead of a wealthier area that has a higher priority. Maybe that's because Barnsley have a Labour MP and the other place has Sunak, a Tory MP. This is pork barrel politics. Anyone? A sense of bitterness is palpable throughout the town. It's hard not to conclude that levelling up is about providing relatively small pots of money for newly elected Tory MPs to give them something to point on their election leaflets, said Barnsley Central Labour MP Dan Jarvis in his constituency office on Friday morning. I do wonder if that would push people in Barnsley to vote Tory in a twisted way, because had they done so, they would also have gotten some of the levelling up funds. These funds were designed to go into safe and marginal Tory seats. Sunak admitted that he changed the Labour methods of funding to send more money to Tory areas. Back in he admitted that this year, but he changed the formulas a few years ago. So they were always going to do this. This was always going to happen, even with the levelling up funding. Regardless of the political colour of the government, they've got to be a bit bigger and more grown up, he added, shrugging as if struggling to comprehend Whitehall's enduring dismissal of one of the country's most deprived communities. It's not that surprising, in my opinion. The EU made formulas based on need. The Tories have done it based on staying in power. The Red Wall Tories are desperate for something to show to their voters. That's why this is happening. Unless these areas have Tory MPs, they won't get much help in England. How twisted is that? You won't get funding unless you vote for the people who took your funding in the first place via council cuts, among other things. Across town, Steve Hooton, leader of Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council, is in similarly pugnacious mood. Barnsley has been ignored. The deprivation here, the needs here. What are we doing wrong? Our bids are for young people. It's for their futures. Well, you, Barnsley, vote for Brexit and then you'd not vote Tory. That's about it. I do find it ironic that, they said they voted for Brexit for people's, the bids are for the kids' futures. And, I remember one conversation I had with my friend where I think it was his father told him he voted for Brexit for his son's future. And he goes, you screwed it though. You messed it up. And that's what's happened here. This Thursday is being seen by some as deciding if levelling up will be remembered as little as more than a slogan. So this is about the budget that hadn't passed recently. I didn't see much about levelling up in there, so we might have to wait a bit longer. 10 months have passed since the white paper was released with the grand promise it would ensure all parts of the country share equally in the nation's success. Imagine believing the Tories on this. We still had really aggressive austerity, and some of these people believe the Tories with levelling up. Imagine not understanding the Tories did this to them in the first place. The Tories are the ones that screwed over a lot of these northern areas. And they still gambled on Brexit, and some of them gambled Tory in 2019, and it's sad, isn't it, that they are not going to get the funding that they need. And it's going to be a lot less than what the EU were giving previously. Jarvis asked how that square with how will that square with Barnsley's legacy of failed bids? In 2021, it attempted to use the levelling up funding to improve its bus network, a move rejected without an informed response. 6 months ago, it tried with another much-needed bus improvement project. The government initially said 3.6 billion was available, a massive boost for the regional economy. We didn't get a single pound. They flip-flopped, saying it wasn't ambitious enough and too ambitious, said Jarvis, a former mayor of South Yorkshire. So, it's very clear that, the Tories had no intention of giving these funds to Barnsley, giving them crappy reasons when it's clear that the money was marked for elsewhere. They're giving rubbish like it's too ambitious, it's not ambitious enough. And I get that the government, this stuff goes through bid writing, etc., but this is stupid. This is genuinely stupid. Barnsley's connectivity is vital for investment. Northern Powerhouse Rail, the package of regional improvement billed as a means to support the transformation of the North's economy, is now in peril, and under review, no detail has been provided of a commitment to improve the network between Sheffield and Leeds, which is crucial for Barnsley as it lies between them. The Northern Powerhouse is a joke. I think they spoke about it as far back as even George Osborne. I think George Osborne was the one that started this Northern Powerhouse nonsense. Here's a question for the North, right? Why would the majority of Tories care about you, given that the Tory heartlands are in the South? And given the fact that Tories in the South don't like the money going to the North because they see that as their tax money. They would rather it gets spent in the South, or they don't have to pay tax at all. Do you see what I'm saying? They were never going to do it. The Tory heartlands are in the South. Those people in the South hate levelling up because they see it as the tax money going to people who don't deserve it. That's the Tory mentality. They gutted the northern bits of HS2, which they claim we now don't have the money for, but they improved the rail lines in the south with HS2. So what was the point of it if it doesn't connect the north to the south? God, I'm starting to sound like Andy Burnham over here, but that's the point. It's done, the southern bits of east-west, but it's not north-south. And then Boris Johnson was claiming, we're going to do something better than HS2 in the north, and is like, why didn't you do that in the first place, Chief, if you're telling the truth? The latest blow in the recent closure of the Doncaster-Sheffield airport. Jarvis said they submitted a Freeport proposal for the site, and that despite the Treasury's own analysis scoring it better than some of the other successful bids, it had been rebuffed. The Freeport thing is a joke, but Barnsley could not even get that, which is pretty funny. The fact that there were bids that were successful, but the Treasury said, actually, Barnsley should have been given the nod, or this area should have been given the nod. It just shows you how kind of flawed the Tory algorithms are. That it's definitely not based on need here. It's based on something else, and I think you know what it is. It's based on if you got a Tory MP or not. The town I live in, which I don't think is anywhere near as deprived as Barnsley, we're getting levelling up funding. We have a Tory MP. I'm sorry, Wild, we gave you Mike Wallace. The deepening cost of the living crisis amplifies the pain of each rejection. The failure to upgrade public transport forces residents into cars at a time of rising fuel costs, which Jeremy Hunt actually made worse with a fuel tax increase of 12 pence. Much of Barnsley's housing stock is a draughty, I'm going to go with, and requires more energy to heat. The cumulative impact helps explain why inflation is running at 10.8% in the town compared with 9.1% in London. So you've got an almost 2% increase in Barnsley. This again is where the Tories can help get their levelling up stuff done and the net zero targets in one go, making this a slam dunk if the Tories did what they promised. Fixing the public transport will help people travel for work and tourism, and insulation in the house will help keep the cost of living down, and it will also help with net zero. But they chose not to do this stuff. In fact, I think it's the Tories that axed a lot of the new Labour policies on loft and wall insulation, which were actually good ideas. I remember I gave them a phone number of a company that had the government subsidy, and they got their loft insulated for free. So yeah, young me shouting out the people. There's a relative though. Sarah Norman, the chief executive of Barnsley Council, says Whitehall's repeated rejection of its proposals is even more baffling when the town proved it can make investments thrive. Yet students at its sixth form college say that despite rising standards, about half of their peers were resigned to staying in Barnsley and entering a low-wage economy. Because even if these kids get good grades, the prospects for them aren't great unless they leave Barnsley, and that's difficult. Especially being a student now is pretty hard. It's harder than it's probably ever been in terms of trying to manage finance. This person says you can work at McDonald's or minimum wage. McDonald's pay above minimum wage, and I think across the country. but there's no good jobs here, said Mason Goldsworthy, 17, who wants to go to university and forge a career in cybersecurity. And isn't it ironic that the government were pushing people to go work in cybersecurity during the pandemic, saying, oh yeah, this person's got no future in ballet, but she's going to work in cyber soon. Nonsense. There are areas that suffer a lot of brain drain because there are no real opportunities. Even where I live, there's not a ton of decent opportunities, but my area is getting levelling up funds, maybe because my local MP is a Tory. So I do feel for these kids, because for decent work they'll have to move. Norman said it's about how we encourage young people in Barnsley to really think about the kind of futures that young people born into wealthier places think is normal. Building aspiration in Barnsley faces a myriad of challenges. The Centre of Cities think tank ranks the health of 63 urban centres. It puts Barnsley near the bottom in several categories, and despite that, they got no levelling up funds. The case for Barnsley is pretty strong, so unless they have crappy bid writers, there's no reason they should have been rejected. The town is practically the smallest working age population with high level qualifications, markedly poor productivity, and a low level of innovation. They've kind of worded this really weird in the Guardian article, but it's evidently like their working age population doesn't have a ton of qualifications. That's the way I've read that. Poor productivity, which could link to the education stuff, but could link into a lack of investment. Paul Swinney, policy director and researcher at the think tank, said the lack of business startups is a trait seen in other former mining towns and suggests that the mindset of toiling for an employer might be embedded in the psyche. I don't know if that's really true, because it could mean that, or it could mean the ones who are looking to start businesses are starting them elsewhere, maybe because they moved for a better job and then decided to set up their own business, or maybe this person is right. I don't know, but I think the idea that people are just kind of settled into just working in the low wage economy, I don't think that's fully true. With the UK poised for fresh austerity measures, thanks Rishi and Jeremy Hunt, Swinney pointed out that Barnsley has been particularly brutalised by previous rounds of cuts between 2011 and 2017-18. Our research shows that our local government was hit the hardest of any government departments. Within this, urban local governments in the north of England was hit the hardest, and within that, two places were hit the hardest: Barnsley and Liverpool. It's madness. The Tories hit them the most. Then the levelling up funds have failed them. This is actual madness. Liverpool normally vote Labour, so them being hit does not surprise me at all. But it is kind of crazy, it does show you that the Tories never cared between 2011 and 2017-18. Now, I don't know what their research shows after that, 2019, 2020, 21, etc. But it does show you that for almost a decade, Barnsley were hit really badly. And the fact that they would vote Brexit doesn't surprise me in a sense. Because they were effectively told what do you have to lose, and evidently what they lost was any EU structural funding they got, and it's not being replaced with anything. And you can see that significant amount of people in Barnsley. You got the meme number 69.9 here turnout, so decent turnout in Barnsley. You got 68.3% of people voting to leave. I do wonder how many in Barnsley regret that decision. They did vote Labour, but if you look here, the Brexit Party won a significant amount of the vote, 30.4% of the vote. That's a lot. They were 3,000 votes, just over 3,000 votes for winning. That's significant. And I think had the Brexit Party not run, I think the Tory MP there, if Dikar Ahmed would have won, I think he would have won there, and that could have changed things for them. They might have got some levelling up funding, but yeah, the Brexit Party wasn't. Didn't go for the smartest play back in 2019. And this is a quote from a Labour MP here saying, "It's no good that the minister is shaking his head because we face a cliff edge cut in the funding for the new European funding period as compared with the previous one. The European funds are designed to give a boost to the economy of flagging regions. I have to say that it's an outrage that areas of the UK with more wealth, more jobs, more business and more prosperity are also getting more European funding in the period ahead." So it's very clear what's going on here. It's the fact that the Tories are giving the money to wealthier areas because they don't care about the ordinary person. They don't care about the struggling areas. All they care about is other Tory MPs. You had red wall Tories kind of chomping at the bit at Jeremy Hunt to keep the levelling up funding, or to get them more levelling up funding because they need something to show voters in the next election. But Labour MPs in Brexit voting areas, they've got nothing to show for it because they're going to struggle to receive any levelling up funding because it's not in the Tory interest. This is power politics at its finest. It's, I'm going to give funding to your area because you vote Tory. You know, you keep us in power. You didn't vote Tory, that's too bad. They admitted it as much in, I think it was Hartlepool, where they said, vote Tory and you'll get more police officers. Like, surely police officers should be, you know, the funding should be distributed on need rather than who you voted for. It's honestly, it's just such a dumb system. And the fact that the EU system was far better, and we're moving away from the better system, is very scary. The fact that, you know, Barnsley was an area that received EU funding. I couldn't tell you exactly how much it was. I couldn't find the exact numbers on it, but they're not receiving anything now, and it'll be a while until the new systems are set up, the new boards are set up to dish out the levelling up funds. So they might not receive anything for a while, and I just wonder how many of them do regret their vote. It'll be interesting to see. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Sorry the video was a bit messier. I need to do more prep work when I do these sort of videos. But like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.